the world of business or the world of the next phase of your life. The second is when when I graduated, I was a government scholar. Okay, those days was different than today. We were more or less aligned to the topics or the profession that we are required to pursue. There was a dearth requirement for professionals, engineering, accountancy, doctors, surveyors, and so on and so forth. And when we graduated, we were, it's a must for us to serve what they call national service, inverted comma, to supply the talent and the professional input for the country that it was building up. It was in the 70s. I started working in the 70s. Just to share with you, I graduated at 22, so I was a bit young that time. Now, that period, you find that most people are already set. Whether if you are a government scholar, you are set to be. If you are not a government scholar, you are also to do your national service, right? And this is where many people would be very set with their lines. Like me, ever since I was in school, I was very active, sports and so on and so forth, plus prefect and so on. But I never take things lying down. Therefore, one moral of the story is that when you graduate, you must always study your environment. You must study the platform that you stand, and then only make your decision which route you want to go. So I did not go to the treasury, which was a must. I did not go to the university to lecture, which was a must. But I go and manage my way by seeing the chairman of organization called Uda and tell him that, my profession is required in your organization more than any department in the government. And to cut the story short, within the same meeting, I prepared a letter already for him to sign. To the minister who can change that, the late Tun Hussein On. All these are former leaders. And that shows, at that time also, leadership of agency can be very entrepreneurial, make quick decision, a minister make decision within 14 days. There you are. I got myself to the stand of many people, going to an organization where it was never thought of by other people. Because I proved to him, if I don't deliver, you sack me. But the other people who are seconded, if they don't deliver, you cannot sack them. They go back to their government departments and get promoted. So that one is, therefore, learn to do marketing. That is very fundamental in entrepreneurship. And then they say that that place is not registered for the purposes of my professional. I'm a surveyor by basic profession. Then I went again and asked the minister to change and find a formula, just to be very simple, and got it also registered that place. Because it got ingredients to be there, but it was not because of administrative reason, it's not there, you fight it. So I managed to get organization also to be the place where, Therefore, the moral of the story is that sometimes you need to be a bit, once you must know your environment, you must be very sure of yourself, you must know how to sell, very important in entrepreneurship. You must know how to sell, and then you must know what the customer needs. So the customer was convinced. There you are. Now, that is one part where I just want to share with you. If you want to work, whether as an entrepreneur or corporate professionals, you must learn to fight. F-I-G-H-T. Not gado, huh? It's not gado. It is, you must fight your own cause. Now, the next is, most of my profession, we become professional. They become consultants and so on. Okay, all my friends became consultants because that time was very good to be a chartered surveyor. You run your own firm and so on. But right from the beginning, I said, no, I want to be a corporate man and maybe an entrepreneur. Okay, maybe entrepreneur. But remember, my background is not entrepreneur background. I'm a kampung boy. Therefore, I did work with the corporate body. I was the first. Again, you must learn to fight. I joined a company which wasn't very big, despite the coziness. They call it Island and Peninsula, where the old GM, retired, an English guy, Mr. Brenton. And then I went in to replace him. Of course, again, I have to prove that, why they need me rather than somebody else who's much older. I was 30, I think 30, 31, 30, your generation. 30, 31 is G, today, now it's just, so you fight. So this is where I'm just showing to you that you have to learn to fight your way right up to it. Now, lastly, I think just you look at my records, you find that while I'm the professional, but I'm a corporate man. I went through all the plantation, property, and the rest, and so on. The bottom line of it is what? Every one of us, you all, when you go into any profession, any businesses, you must have the knowledge, the desire, and also the temperament, plus, which we discuss later, to navigate. And this goes beyond the knowledge of sciences, the knowledge of law, the knowledge of whatever. And for that reason, I think there is one, our friend here, he said that he's in the political what? Philosophy and political. I think there's one dimension where it is good to be good at it as well. Because that's how you must navigate, not just your organization, also navigate when you deal with people from different countries at different levels and so on and so forth. So there you are. This is, I think I got quite a reasonable credential to be, one is like a father to you level, not grandfather. He said that grandfather, I said no. I said just a father kind of level, but I will later on share with you the period that we went through Malaysia, I think later on, and how people, the younger generation, should learn from what we have experienced in the past, because you are not going to experience the same path that we had gone through, because there's so many points later on we can discuss, but just opening the chapter, open up your mind. What we went through is not the same, but learn from what we went through, because it has got a bearing on how we can do better in the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now we move on to a slightly younger man. That suffices.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning. Firstly, I'd like to thank UKEC for inviting me to come up here to Manchester, first time. I used to be a Man U supporter, but no longer. I know it sounds like a fair weather friend, but But anyway, it occurred to me when I first looked at the panel that none of us were entrepreneurs. So why are we talking about it? But then on reflection, I realized that Datuk Sri, for example, has brought entrepreneurship qualities to a GLC. And if you don't understand that, just think of Battersea. And later we'll talk about examples of people like that, where our big GLCs now have become very entrepreneurial, because in order to compete regionally and internationally, you've got to have that mindset. And that kind of happened about 10 years ago. Even for myself, and just speaking briefly about my journey, I guess if there's one word to summarize my career, it would be sesat. I actually came to the UK thinking I wanted to be an engineer. I was really into aeroplanes, and in fact, my goal at that point was to be a fighter pilot. And then I went for a medical and failed, because apparently if I ejected, I wouldn't survive. So that was the end of that career. And then I became a lawyer. Why a lawyer? Because I actually had a very bad economics essay, and I just thought 3 years of ceteris paribus, can't tahan. So that was it. So I rang up my guardians and said, if I didn't want to do economics, what's the next best thing? So she said, you could do law. So I thought, okay, Perry Mason, Save Damsels in Distress. I was quite into Earl Stanley Gardner's book, so I thought, be a lawyer. And then I finished law, and again I got sesat. I met someone, a Tan Sri, who berated me and said, you don't quite understand that, accounting is very interesting. I said, I don't want to be a bookkeeper. He says, no, it's not about bookkeeping. And then he told me, even he, as a partner of a Big Four firm, was actually running a chicken farm. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know you ran things as accountants. And that's when I made my first revelation, that actually the pathway to business is actually through accounting, because it teaches you the basics of a business. But more importantly, the objective is not to be the accountant. The objective is to be the CEO. Now, in my context, why I think I'm kind of qualified to talk about entrepreneurship is that as a partner of an accounting firm, you have to be entrepreneurial. We're always trying to find the next big thing in order to make money, right? So if I recall, 6 years ago, we were sitting down with my predecessor, Datuk Johan, and we were saying, so what do you think Bank Negara is really interested in? And we said, Islamic finance. So we started, driving the Islamic finance agenda within PwC. I eventually became the global leader only because no one could spell musharaka anywhere in the world except Malaysia. And then to kind of end it, I ended up convincing the International Accounting Standards Board to actually recognize Islamic finance within the accounting framework, right? So you have to be entrepreneurial in whatever you do, even as a professional consultant. The second point maybe to raise is an observation. Now, if you take from what Datuk Sri is saying, at his time, there was not much choice. The government decided, in fact, I think you mentioned that they already had a bilik dah sedia kan. So they had a little signboard saying quantity surveyor, accountant, lawyers, and they would send people across to train for that office. By the time it came to my generation, they were a bit nicer lah. They gave you scholarships, but again, it was in defined professions. So I got a scholarship for Mara to do law, and then I remember having to go to Bryanston Square to ask to tukar, So I joined this queue, got in, and the first thing they said, nak minta maaf ya? So I said, why? He says, oh, this is the minta maaf queue. Mana yang fail and nak minta extend. So actually, I said, no, I passed. But I want to change. It took queue lain, the next room. So that's what happened. I changed, and they were nice enough to let me do it, and I became an accountant. But if I reflect, and there was an interesting article in the FT last week that examined how much people were earning in the last 40 years. And they said 40 years ago, the pathway to money was actually to be a professional, engineer, accountant, lawyer, doctor, whatever, again. But what was interesting is that 40 years on, you would think that only bankers made a lot of money. But actually, based on that survey, doctors in the UK actually make more money now than they did 40 years ago, right? And if you look at some of the professions, we've tagged along. So for example, I was having dinner with this head of chambers, and he drives an Aston Martin, okay? And these lawyers in the city have actually grown with the city themselves. Every time you do a transaction, there's a lawyer. Every time you do a transaction, there's an accountant. So some professions have also tagged along with the financial field, but not all professions have done very well. I think based on that survey, apparently academics have not done as well, engineers and so on. So my point is that it's also generational. And you guys are at a very interesting stage when you compare with working as an employee or becoming an entrepreneur, and maybe I too can make 19 billion by selling my WhatsApp. So, which comes to my third point. Do you think it's that easy? Now, how many of you here have seen the Kickstarter's website? How many of you have invested in a Kickstarter? Oh, good, few. I have. I'm honest enough to admit I'm a Kickstarter junkie. But what I find very interesting about this is that when you look at, what is Kickstarter? It's a website which does crowdsourcing. So someone puts up an idea, you like it, you go to Amazon.com, you give them some money. But what I realized looking at the backgrounds of the people who run these projects, invariably they are masters of something. They've either conquered being an engineer, conquered being a finance person, conquered in something first before they ventured off and did this. So I think the most bizarre thing I've bought so far was a pair of headphones that actually can project images. It's called Glyph. So, like Beats, kan? Yang besar, kan? You can hear it as music. But when you want to watch a movie, you just turn it down. So you look a bit like that guy from Star Trek. I think it's cool, for $569 I too will invest in that. But if you kind of strip all that, what makes them successful? What makes an entrepreneur successful? Partly is conquering or owning something. I don't think you can really do this as a fresh graduate. In fact, based on any statistics you see, most startups fail. The startups that succeed, usually they have some knowledge. In fact, I would say probably the optimum age to go out is in your late 30s, early 40s. Because at that stage, you understand the business, you understand the product, you understand how to market it, but you also have something, you have some knowledge and track record. And then now, and this is why I say your generation have it it's a very good time, is that in my generation, if I had a great idea, I would have to go to a bank and convince them to give me money. Now I don't. I just go to Kickstarters, do a cool video with my iPhone, and then sit back and wait for people to fund me. Pretty cool. So that's, I think, what I would say at this point. And I'll just pass on back to Ivan.
And on to our final speaker before panel questions.
Assalamualaikum, good afternoon. Or is it afternoon? I think almost just. My name is Wan Firdaus. First of all, thank you to UKEC as well for inviting me. PAN is very close to my heart. I remembered I started PAN in London, I think 7-8 years back. PAN used to be organized in Malaysia, by the way. Then we organized in London. So alhamdulillah, I'm quite happy to see, it's done now outside London in Manchester. So it's very well done. So congratulations to UKEC and the committee members. Very well done. So my reaction when I got the email about the topic was similar to Cik Faiz. Entrepreneurs, like I'm not even an entrepreneur myself, I'm not lost. I started as a law student, ended up working in the government. Now I'm an investment banker. But maybe I was a bit more just going with the flow, like everyone else in my generation. But I think over the years, maybe I don't have as much observation experience compared to the first two speakers, but there are a few traits and observations that I've made of successful entrepreneurs in Malaysia, especially the ones who do have a global brand. And there are not that many Malaysians who have a global brand. I'm fortunate enough, just the other day on Twitter, one of the Twitter handles which I followed was asking questions, what are global Malaysian brands? Which most people may not realize it was started by a Malaysian. AirAsia is a global brand which a lot of people know is started by a Malaysian, Tony. But many people may not know that Shangri-La, a very big global brand, is also started by a Malaysian as well, Robert Kwok. A lot of people don't know as well that even brands which are popular in Malaysia like San Francisco Coffee or 1901 hot dogs, they are actually Malaysian brands started by Malaysians. Why they use San Francisco Coffee or not Gombak Coffee, that's a marketing question, right? There are similar things or similar traits that you can see amongst these entrepreneurs who've made it. And actually over the generations and over the years, the challenges, or what I would say the barriers to entry of a person to become an entrepreneur, not only in Malaysia but globally, I think the barriers of entry has become much lower. And because of that, there are a lot more entrepreneurs, every day compared to the yesteryears. Meaning, if you were a baby boomers generation, the generations of our fathers, the idea of becoming an entrepreneur is just lunatic. If suddenly, they tell their parents, our grandfathers, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, their parents would have told them, you're crazy, go get a government job, or go become an accountant or a lawyer. I think nowadays, it's less, my parents would still, your parents would still say that, go and get a good job and go and become a professional. But the barriers of entry is much lower. But at the same time, because the barriers of entry is much lower, competition is much higher, you see? And I always tell young people this, it's easy to become an entrepreneur, but to become a successful entrepreneur nowadays is very difficult because you have a lot of competition. People are much smarter. You must be really, really organized, must be really good, must be really marketable for you to be successful. So a lot more entrepreneurs, a lot more competition. So one advice, so a few advice I always give to young people, even myself. I want to be an entrepreneur as well. Like many others in my generation, we don't want to become an investment banker forever, or a lawyer forever, or a government servant forever. We all want to be a billionaire, right? I mean, that's what we all want to be, right? So obviously, knowledge, as what Chief Faiz was saying just now, is very important. I noticed that a lot of young people who just left university, who wants to start a startup, many don't even know the basic of cash flows, for example, or the basic of return on investment, for example. I get a lot of young people coming to me, Chief Firdaus, can you help me do fundraising? Then I ask them, what's your ROI? What's your what's your 10 years plan or 5 years plan, or how's your, when do you plan to reach cash flow positive, right? Now, this kind of terms or business knowledge is something which, every entrepreneur must know before you even have a product, or having a good product is something, but having the technical skills of managing a business, of becoming an entrepreneur, is also very important. And a lot of young people miss this. That is why, more often than not, I always encourage young people, for the first 10 years after you graduate, maybe to become a professional is not such a bad idea after all. To become a professional working in a corporate company, you learn how big corporates manages their own money and their own finances, how big corporates manages competition. Because at the end of the day, the basic of business, no matter how big or how small your businesses are, is the same. You see? If you look at Tony Fernandez, we all study how Tony became successful, right? He's an accountant. He understood the basic of how to deal with money, how to deal with the bank, the leverages that you can have when you borrow money from the bank. Kickstarter is good, but at one point, everyone goes to the bank, you see? So all this basic information, all this basic knowledge, usually if you work in a professional company for the first 10 years of your life, after you graduate, you will be able to learn those skills. Secondly, access to capital. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs nowadays, when you want to start up, right, it is very important that you have enough finances to not only run your business, but to arrange your life, to have a life, Because the reality is, a lot of people, it's all good and dandy when you talk about, I'm going to start small and all that, but at the end of the day, when you're my age, you're going to end up married, you're going to have a son, you're going to need to buy a house, somebody has to pay the bills, the Pampers, the susu, and all that. That's the reality of life, right? So I always tell my young entrepreneurs friend, as much as you want to sacrifice, but the reality of life is there, because you can't just dump your wife and child at a cubicle somewhere, right? Life goes on, right? So that first 10 years of your life, you need to be able to learn enough skills, save enough money, and really find the right partner, find the right life partner who will be able to share your vision of becoming an entrepreneur. Like every entrepreneur that I've met, having the right life partner is like very important. As people always say, behind every successful man or woman, there's always a life partner, And that's the reality of life. So I think that's the second thing. And speaking of life partner, finally, every entrepreneur that I know always have a team, at least a team of 2 or 3 people. You see, behind Tony Fernandez, there's Kamarudin Meranon, which not many people know, you see. But Dr. Kamarudin Meranon was really, the brains behind most of the stuff which Tony does. Tony is the marketing guy, the guy with the red cap, on stage, the marketing guy. Now, even like someone, most of the other global brands, even like other global startups, even like Facebook, they always have a team, So you must start your entrepreneur journey to build your global brand or to build your first billion-dollar company by having that team. And that team is the guy or the girl sitting next to you now, It starts now, really. I always tell my UKEC juniors, over the years, I've left UKEC for like 7-8 years now. You see, the most important thing out of UKEC and your university life, it's not PAN or MSLS or corporate careers fairs. It is the friendship that you build during these years. Because trust me, after you finish university, there's no more time to make friends. After university is real life. And real life is not easy. Okay? So the bond and friendship that you have now is the trust that you have in creating a team to build your company. Because a good company is all about trust. You can't do everything, right? Tony couldn't build Air Asia by doing everything himself. He had a team. He had one or two key persons that helped him. So for you to really build your brand, it's not a one-man show. No one builds a billion-dollar company on his own. Maybe they will say so, but really there's a team behind it. So my experience myself post UKC, after I go back to Malaysia, I do many things for fun. Young corporate Malaysian ideas. Maybe I probably started some of the ideas of these organizations, but I have a lot of my friends who helped me to build all these organizations. And they would be the same friends of mine, when I decide to quit my job and build my own company, I would be asking help and having them as my partners. So I think it's very important that at your age, you guys must realize the really important things in life. It is not about, it's good for you to organize events. This is very good training. It's good for you to learn the important skills. By the end of the day, your friends and the partnership, the things that you learn for the next 10 years, those are the key things which will help you to be an entrepreneur when you decide to do so. Okay, I think that's all.
Thank you. Right now we move on to panel questions, which we will move from left to right as well. So following on from your speech earlier, what do you think, this question will have two parts, a domestic and international part. What do you think Malaysia can do to push for this entrepreneurship in Malaysia in a more IT-centric and competitive world? And internationally, when Malaysian companies expand outwards from Malaysia, is it important to keep the brand recognition, a national identity, or to assimilate into another country's identity?
I think Malaysia is one of those countries where actually there's a lot of money being thrown out to entrepreneurs, but it's not as straightforward as it may seem. If you are a IT startup, you've got companies or agencies like MDAC, Cradle, they actually give you seed fund. But as I mentioned just now, even with this assistance, funding assistance, or even mentorship, you would still need to have those basics on your own to be successful. But at the same time, I think one good thing about Malaysia, you see, I always compare Malaysia and Singapore. You see, a lot of the Valley's venture funds are in Singapore. Not many are in Malaysia. So a lot of Malaysians actually go to Singapore to get the venture funds financing and all that. But Malaysia is one of those places where, everything is possible, really, as an entrepreneur. You see, I always tell people, if you're going to be a really successful entrepreneur, Malaysia is the place, because the possibilities are limitless. In Singapore, it may be good and dandy, in terms of venture capital and all that, but Singapore is really quite a more corporate setting rather than an entrepreneurial kind of setting. So that's one difference. Going back to your point on the branding, right? I think most most people nowadays, they would rather have a global brand, a universal brand, not global, but a universal brand, rather than have a Malaysian attachment to it. But doesn't mean that if it's a Malaysian brand that it won't be successful. I mean, Air Asia, again, it's technically an Asian brand, but it's successful. I mean, there are many, Genting, for example, a Malaysian brand, but it's still, wherever it is still called Genting, Sime Darby, thank you, Dato', for pointing that out. Started as a Mat Saleh brand, now it's, Malaysian brand, successful all over the world, largest planter on the planet. So I think nowadays, most Malaysian companies, they want to be global. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, first of all is my view. Number one is let's not go and target that you must be a Malaysia-centric brand when you start business or you start entrepreneur. The bottom line is always a business case, entrepreneurial case, and a successful business. That's number one. Okay, so if it started by Malaysian, in Malaysia, and then move on, or by Malaysian elsewhere, become a second point. That's my view on that. At the same time, I would like to also emphasize that when you talk about entrepreneurship, you talk about businesses where entrepreneurs can thrive. It is not just IT driven or those what we call the soft businesses only. The whole of human, the world require both the soft and the hard, the software and the hardware. You still need entrepreneurship. There's a lot of opportunities and money to be made in the business of the brick and mortar, or what we call the fundamental or basic business of, number one, those relating to what's so basic to us, food. Anything to do with food, the value chain. The value chain of food is right from the planting right to the top. While Malaysian has been very strong in some of the food production, but we have a lot of opportunities in the post or the value chain above food production. A lot of this biotechnology, bio-food product, health product, and so on, needs to be, it opens up a lot of opportunities of entrepreneurs. And today, you might not realize there are many of those entrepreneurs in that field in Malaysia, except that they have not come to the level where it is a global brand as yet. But they do thrive. Okay, business must start with the first level. They must be able to survive. Okay, then after they survive, they have to work harder and then move up the ladder. It is not an overnight where you become a brand known in Malaysia, and then only after that you can go into the region or the globe. Okay, so there are a lot of opportunities. What is the bottom line is that, number one is the brick and mortar businesses are still there. Food is definitely, I mentioned. The second is those that are relating to what you call the creation of space. The creation of space, we are not talking about housing, we are not talking about these two traditional way of looking at things. But the challenges of your generation to come is not so much of the building of houses and so on, because those are the simpler things. But new ideas, new opportunities for people who can create the space where people can shelter themselves in the environment that suits that generation. Not the past generation, but the generation called the Jiwa generation onward, in the way that it can be the most efficient, the fastest, etc., the most eco-friendly, and the rest. Some of it are not even here at the moment, but these were the opportunities for these, I call it pockets of opportunities. And the big players themselves are looking for what they call, in my terminology, I call it the orange concept. It's just that we throw it to the market, and where are some of these small group of, I call it dreamers, if I may use that word, who can come up to you and say that I have this model, And we can make it work. And this is for this generation of users in future. If we bite, then there will be this partnership. What it means here also, the approach to entrepreneurship, first, it must be the right dream. All right? There must be a growth opportunity. That's the number one. The market must be there. Number two, you must be able to create a better market than what it is today. And then you must dream of it, convince people, and then the rest will come in place. I don't think that you have to worry about funding, the support from some of the sponsors and so on. I think you mentioned just now. Today, people have opened up. It is easier compared to before. But what we are looking for are those bright ideas. You all are in the generation that must help us, help the current corporate bodies, businesses, and whether government or private sectors in pushing those barriers forward. Of course, there are other things like mobility. Another trend is you look at the growth of, it's not cars. Cars now, there's a big challenge whether the traditional way of mobility, this concept of always everybody must have two cars, one car, it must be 1600 cc and so on. I remember my time to have an Alfa Romeo, you should never heard of that, I think, 1.3. So I said, no, I don't want 1.3, I want 1.6 Fiat ST with turbo that can beat any car. So that's why I went for it. And red color. That was my first really powerful car. No, the point here is that the way that your generation and your next generation that you are going to have to pursue to build up are looking for? Now you have to talk about the electric cars and so on. By the end of the day, is it cars we are talking about? The entrepreneurship must not look at cars. You must look at the topic of mobility, opportunities in mobility. Today, there are simple examples where people don't buy cars anymore. They just they swipe the cards, right? They just use the opportunity just to travel. There's mobility, how to improve my mobility. So therefore, there are businesses that can come out of it. We do not know what. There are some people who came up with some bright ideas. You know, some bicycle. You know, Boris Johnson started that bicycle, the Barclays bicycle in London. And I saw one in Melbourne the other day, the green car where you just swipe I wanted to try, I dare not. I don't want to get stuck in the car because I wasn't familiar. The point here is, those are the new generation of thoughts. The thought leaders, entrepreneurship, that will be the order of the day of the future, maybe. And I tell you, people like us at our group, when we look at, we are also one of our core business is motor industry, Auto. We are one of the big ones all over, not just Malaysia, China, Australia, and all over ASEAN. But then we saw this as a trend where is it going to be next 10 years? When we are, I won't say worry in the better comma, we have to take very serious view. Is that the model that we're doing today, is it the model of tomorrow? And the model of tomorrow, then the next question is how many of this, what they call it, sharing of the smaller, we call it the smaller boats or the smaller fighter boats against the big frigates or big warship. This thing that will change. And when that change, opportunities are all abundant for people like you all, not people like us anymore. So, I mean, just to show to you, the heart, the IT, yes. As far as we believe is internet, definitely there's no replacement. It will grow. Definitely. But it is an enabler business. There's a lot of opportunities in the internet or the communication, the businesses. But those are enablers. But there are also other businesses. So I just want to conclude by saying that open up your mind. Do not just be looking at entrepreneurship to be, I want to be another Tony Fernandez. You know, not that kind of thing all the time. Look at the many entrepreneurs that are now millionaires in Malaysia, which you all do not even know they are next to you, next to me. Okay, so, but they are all entrepreneurs. They have good life. The next thing is they also, the generation Y, for example, today, I had a research done for one topic. The next topic I want to do is, I told my people is, I want the GY. Go and study the GY space needs. I do not know the answer yet, but I'm working with a university, trying to find what actually a GY space needs, not housing. People talk about affordability and housing, but I shift. You know, people were, again, as Dato mentioned just now, sometimes as leaders, today we are the generation, we must encourage. We do not know the answer, but you all are in a better position to provide us the answer. So that survey, that analysis is to be done by the GUI team, not by those, professors who are in the 50s or 60s. I told them especially, I don't want them to be in that team, because they will not be giving the right feedback that we want. Just to share with you, opportunities are so abundant in entrepreneurship. I think for now, I still at that. Thank you.
Actually, I would agree with the basic premise that Malaysia has its fair share of entrepreneurs. In fact, I was talking to a guy from one of the big card companies, credit cards, and apparently we are among the best fraudulent people in the world. I'm not sure many of you have credit cards, probably your parents' credit cards, but there are many countries in the world that don't accept Malaysian credit cards. And this guy was telling me, he says, you go to countries and they pay, $50 to swipe your card to steal your numbers. In Malaysia, we tap the telephone line to get a few 100,000 numbers, different scale. So don't feel bad, meaning that Malaysians are actually very entrepreneurial. And I think picking up Dato' Sri's point, I just met this couple who sold their business, which was essentially to do with, reference checking. Simple idea, they just built it over the years. And I think they cashed out at about 300-400 million ringgit, right? So the point is, it does exist in Malaysia. I would agree with the contention that it is possible to do these things. Of course, could it be better? Yes. I think that unfortunately in Malaysia, we're still very, how's it put it? We fear the worst. So we have a lot of governmental red tapes and requirements. But that's because we are entrepreneurial and they want to make sure you don't do something stupid. And if you think, okay, as an example of how stupid it can be, do you remember the case in China where they put plastic in children's milk? Now, you don't need to pass a law saying don't put plastic in your milk, right? But it amazes me that there are people out there who are willing to do anything for a buck. So the moment, I think the balance is not quite right, that we've got too many controls, and maybe what the country needs to do is to start to release some of this to encourage you guys to take risks. And by the way, many of you who will try will fail. In fact, I'll just end with this statement. Do you know what a trader is, like a money trader, a currency trader? Well, a banker kind of defined a good trader as one who wins more than he loses. So what does that mean? It basically means that even the best trader in the world will lose money. He cannot always win. But a good trader wins more than he loses. Right? So my point is that if there's one thing you should take away from this, it's to be a good entrepreneur, you must have a risk-taking kind of mindset. And you must accept that there'll be times you'll have to go back and live with your parents because you've lost everything. Look at Simon Cowell. He had to go back and live with his mother at one point in his history. Even Richard Branson got bankrupt a few times, right? It happens, but you must have the mindset to say, yeah, that's just, sekejap je, I'll get on. So I think with that, we'll pass you back.
Due to time constraints, we'll move on to questions from the floor. You can address it either to the panel as a whole or to individual speakers. If there are any questions. Yeah, shoot. The lady on the left first, yeah.
I'm Andrea from University of Nottingham, currently doing law. So Dato' Sri mentioned earlier that to be an entrepreneur, you have to know how to sell yourself. So I was wondering whether you could share with us maybe 2 to 3 tips on how you could apply strategies in selling yourself.
We'll take 2 questions at a time before moving on. So we'll take your question as well.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. I'm Amina Azman. I'm from the LSE, London School of Economics. I have 2 questions. One is about, I don't know whether all of you have heard about this thing, but I've heard this from someone. It's, this person said something that to succeed, it's not about what you know, but who you know. So what is your view on that? And the next question is, I think recently the topic of social business is very much discussed quite recently, especially after the emergence of businesses, social businesses like Body Shop, by Anita Roddick and Tom's. So what is your idea on, I mean, how much, to what extent students like us should rethink back on our values along the line of integrity, having good ethics, and also to balance that view with our desire to be a billionaire, like a money-making machine. So what's your view on that? Thank you.
Yeah, on the first question just now on maybe one or two, I would say tips, just some of the views that I can give. Tips sounds too powerful. Number one is the knowledge. I think we discussed about it. The first, with knowledge and the real understanding of what you want to deliver, then you can market it well. If you are a good talker, but you don't have that kind of base, you'll be, what's the word? People won't believe you. I don't like to use the word, but they won't believe you. Because a person who wants to sell his idea, and he must know the business, the product itself, the design, and he also must know what actually that the user or customer looking for. Just an example, if you were to look at Steve Jobs, if you watch his movie, I think it's good if you want to be an entrepreneur, you watch his movie, but not everybody can be like him. And basically, that is one. He will just go on the basis that this is what I believe the people, the user wants. Even the board, the chairman, and all this, there is one, the CEO, he called in from Pepsi. He just pushed them aside and said that this is what it should be. And then he was the one who stood up to the sort of the crowd to convince that is what we are selling. We are here, we are not there. I'm not fighting Microsoft, I am creating something that you all want, that's all. But he is convinced the people because he can tell in detail what are the products that he's doing. Okay? Number two is that I think that the advice raised earlier to acquire that the extra depth of knowledge in order to convince. You cannot be an island. Somebody mentioned you cannot be alone. If you, again, a simple example is that the late Mr. Job, who had done a good job. Okay, I'm just using the example. There's so many examples, but just the one that I can remember immediately is when he knows what he wants to give to the market, but he knows very well that, or he knew very well that there is one item inside that box that he is going to change, that it is outside his level of skill. So what did he do? He go and search for a very, very good engineer. Okay? And then the engineer came, but the most important is this, very important. He is able to convince this particular engineer that in marketing himself to this engineer, that this is what I want you to do. From the big, to put simply, the big box like that into this tiny one. And the guy was stunned, and then he said, okay, for 200 US per day, I'll do it for you. Basically, again, to me, it is not just marketing and also able to buy in and convince people, which is still a form of marketing. So you must be good in convincing. Okay, so those are...
I'll answer the second question. So.
Yeah, I'll answer the question regarding know who against know how. I think in real life, it is definitely both. You know, I mean, only a fool would say that, you know, if you're a guy who knows how, you don't need the know-who's, which is not true. I think the know-who is very important. But let me put it this way. You see, the know-who, usually people think the know-who is, you know, you need to know politicians, you need to know, important people. But actually, the know-who can even go to simple levels as such, the know-who of the people of your generation, the people of skills of around your own generation. He or she may not be your friend, but you need to know that the best person in a particular area is this person, but in a 360 degrees relationship, he or she might be a friend to your friend, if you understand what I mean. So somebody gave me a good advice when I first graduated. He said, you see, Firdaus, if you want to be an entrepreneur, the best time is actually when you're 35 years old, 35. So I said, why? Why 35? Because when you are 35, most of your friends whom you will be asking for favors from will be in the position to help you in their particular companies. Meaning that if I'm, say, a supplier to KFC or McDonald's, right, for example, right, there'll be a lot of things that I would need, licenses, I would need to find a logistics person, I would need to find, somebody who sells cooking oils, whatever, right? So at the age of 35 to 40, most of your friends, your peers, would be in a position in their particular company or their particular position to help you. So that is really the know-who, which is more important than know-who in terms of politicians and what. Well, I mean, it helps, I'm not denying that, it helps. I would also want to add that another important know-who is mentorship. Now, this is not something which, there's no science to it. Over the years, I've been trying my best to connect people, young professionals with corporate leaders through Young Corporate Malaysians and ideas. It's not really a science. Some people don't click with each other and you can't push it, right? Now, this is where you, as a person, must be resourceful enough, entrepreneurial enough, like what Dr. Wahab did when he first graduated and went straight to meet up with the chairman of UDA, and Chairman UDA doesn't know him. Now that is the know-who that requires your resourcefulness to find your mentor. And having the right mentor I'm very fortunate. I have a few people, from previous chairman of PwC, Dr. Johan, he was really like a mentor to me since I was in my UKEC days. And he was the one who connected me, or rather, who said nice things about me to other CEOs. You see, so when you have the right mentor, this person might also be the one who connect you to other people as well. So just to recap, so the know-who in the real world may not be that you must waste your time playing golf with somebody that you don't even like, So that's not really the idea of a know-who, It becomes more sophisticated nowadays. Now, the second question was on social entrepreneurship, social businesses, right? I have a lot of friends who nowadays do social entrepreneurship. What I always remind them is this: social entrepreneurship is still entrepreneurship. You must still make money, For your effort or for your venture to be sustainable, you cannot rely on donations and sponsorship, as your business model. It has to be a successful and it has to be a sustainable business model. But social entrepreneurship, rightly so, is about maybe, an entrepreneur will make, 30% or 20%, profit every year. But, social entrepreneurs is willing to make less as long as the business is sustainable. As long as the social objective of it is sustainable. Now, a lot of Malaysians, young Malaysians that I know, they justify by saying, oh, I'm doing social entrepreneurship, but what they're doing is not sustainable. So cannot. If you are going to run a social entrepreneurship, but your business model is not sustainable, then you're just wasting your time and you're wasting other people's time. So that distinction is very important.
Just taking up the second and third question, observations. There was a survey done, I think in the last 2 years in Malaysia of SMEs. And when they asked the question, who did you seek advice from? 51% said kawan. Okay, your family friend, your uncle, your auntie. Only 46 said they took professional help. And that puzzles me because when you look again at what causes startup failures, invariably it's financial discipline. If you talk to the banks, they will tell you that actually great idea, great marketing, but no money. You know, and as an auditor, the first thing I look when I come into a company is look at their cash book and bank rec. If they haven't done a bank rec, you know they're kaput or will be kaput at some point. So the financial discipline is something which you mustn't forget. In fact, just to go back to Kickstarters, I got this gadget which really irritated my wife. It's basically a wind speed measurer, and it kind of slips into your iPhone headphone socket, and it whizzes around. And so I knew that on the night, that Valentine's Day's night, it was going at 25 miles per hour outside my flat. But the point is that when you look at that, the three guys who set it up, it was two guys and a girl. The two guys were the engineers who kept on improving the design, but it was the accountant, the girl, who actually got it all moving, right? So that's the first observation. The second one about social, I totally agree. There's no point doing something if it still is not financially viable, right? In fact, there's an Arab saying, isn't it? Trust in God, but tie up your camel. Meaning that, yeah, you can do many things on faith, and there are many things you can do for good reasons. But ultimately, if it fails, you disappoint a lot of people, in particular the ones that you're trying to protect or help. So that's why, I mean, taking Tan Sri's point, one of the things that we started to do as part of our CSR is not just collect money, but we go in to improve what we call the finance function. So we will go into a charity and say, I'm going to send one of my accounting people to just examine how did you put together your books? How do you put out your financials? Are the numbers in a way that can convince a corporate sponsor that you know what you're doing and you're using the money wisely? No corporate wants to give you money and then find out that you've spent it on a jolly to London, you know? So it's those kind of things.
Okay, we'll take 3 more questions. You go first.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
We'll take 4 questions and then answer them before moving on.
Okay, hello. We have 2 questions actually coming from the live stream, from one of the guy from the live stream. And first question is directly to Datuk Faiz. Does Datuk Faiz discourage grads from venturing into starting something fresh out of university as opposed to going into the corporate world? And the second one is an open question, asking about how do fresh graduates who are aspire to start their own business, how do they get capital, access to capital? Thank you.
Sorry, can you just repeat the Datuk Faiz question?
Oh, it's the one. It is just a matter of opinion. Does Datuk Faiz discourage grads, the fresh graduate, from venturing into starting something fresh out of university as opposed of going into the corporate world?
Yeah.
I think it's more to entrepreneurship thing.
Well, I think if picking up the various points that all of us have been talking about, I mean, when Firdaus mentioned that 35 years old, I was talking about owning or knowing something before you go out. So the answer is yes. I mean, of course, if you're so passionate and you really want to rush out and do that great thing, please do. And then in the second question, we'll tell you where to find the money. But my worry is that you will be part of that 95% that fail statistics, right? And then when you have kids, like what Firdaus, how are you going to feed the child? So I think that there is I guess, a certain realization that university prepares you in a certain way, but it doesn't prepare you for everything, right? The street smartness you only pick up when you're actually working. The industry knowledge you only pick up when you're in the industry. The networking only occurs when you're in that industry. And maybe to illustrate it as a point, my middle daughter announced suddenly that she's decided she wants to do music and psychology. I thought, okay. But then she's gone on to say, and I'm going to set up a music school that you, Dad, will finance me buying the property so I can run my music school, and I'm going to do all these things. So then I thought, okay, there's no who already, there's capital already. But I said, but you have no idea how to run a music school. Oh, okay, that's a good idea. I'll go intern in one. But you see, that's exactly the thought process. Yes, you can find the money. Yes, you can find, the bank of mom and dad. But the issue is, do you know how to run one or not? Do you know who your target audience is? Who are you going to market? Do you know how to price your product? Do you know where to locate your music school? Which instruments are you going? By the way, instruments are very expensive. You know, how are you going to finance all that? Right? Okay. Second question I'll leave to the other two.
We'll take 3 questions.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Tialog and I'm from the LSE. I want to ask to the panel, these questions to the panel. When you want to develop a localized brand into an international brand, how do you ensure consistency in your standards and your identity?
Okay, next question.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Liu and I'm studying in the University of Leeds. I'll keep this really, really short. In Malaysia, should we have more corporate giants or more small entrepreneurs? Thank you.
Lovely. And then last question.
Assalamualaikum, peace be upon you. My question is more about global branding. As previously asked, how do we create a global brand? Because we seem to get the idea that to create a global brand that we have to have English names or more appealing to the Western community, or that is the so-called international standard. But how do we, I want to ask the opinions of all the panels that how do we create a global brand but at the same time maintain a national identity or being distinctively Malaysian? Thank you.
Lovely.
Just referring to the stream question, whether entrepreneurship first or going to corporate first, I think when I was your age, my answer would have been different. When I was your age, I would have thought, oh, you know, just go for it, like, you know. What do I not know? What do I not know? You know, I know everything, right? When I was your age, lah. You know, 10 years later, I realized I don't know anything. So I think that's why when you have friends, when you have older friends, when you have mentors, you are more grounded. I think in Malaysia now, definitely, I think for young Malaysians, especially smart ones like you, I would really encourage for you to go into top companies, you know, go into real corporate companies, learn the trades, then only you open your own business. Access to capital, I think in Malaysia, there's a lot of banks and there's a lot of Dana and, you know, all these funds, SME, Corp. It's really not that difficult. What is more difficult is once you have the money, how do you use the money, and, you know, what kind of business plan that you have and all that. Consistency in brand, I think that one, leave it to our Sam Darby, big boss, to answer that one. Very good question on big corporates against entrepreneurs. You know, whether we should have more big corporates in Malaysia or we should have more entrepreneurs. I think everyone realized that obviously we as a country, it's much better for us to have more successful entrepreneurs. You know, that creates a good environment for the economy to grow and for more people to be hired and more sustainable. But at the same time, I think big corporates have their role to play. I mean, Malaysia, I mean, no matter what people say about the GLCs, you know, that runs quite a number of the businesses and the economy in Malaysia, I think GLCs have evolved to a larger extent for the past few years. I think now GLCs for me, are like the anchors to entrepreneurs. You see, I mean, a lot of Malaysian entrepreneurs, maybe they started by serving the GLCs and then they go global. A very significant example is actually Petronas. If you look at the vendors that came out of Petronas, many of them has become very successful globally. And I think just one name that has become recently very, very successful is Sapura Kencana. I mean, Sapura Kencana today, you know, is a company, which is a Malaysian brand, a Malaysian company that's bidding for jobs all the way from Brazil to Russia and, you know, everywhere. So at the end of the day, these GLCs in Malaysia, these big corporates, play a role as an anchor for you as an entrepreneur to start. You know, you bid jobs and you win jobs from local big businesses, big GLCs, and then you start learning, and then you go and bid jobs overseas. How to have a Malaysian brand, you know, I mean, how do you keep the Malaysian brand even when you, I mean, is English important and all that? I think at the end of the day, It's what kind of product and what kind of vision you have for your business. It's really that. And it's also the industry that you're in. Going back to Sapura Kencana, for example, I mean, Sapura Kencana really, essentially, is a Malaysian company with Malaysian engineers, Malaysian owners, Malaysian management, and yet they are sending people all over the world to do the subsea jobs and all that. So at the end of the day, I think people would know that you are a Malaysian company essentially because you have Malaysians working in them. So it doesn't mean that you have to detach yourself from the so-called Malaysianness of it. But at the end of the day, it is the quality of the work that you deliver as the entrepreneur. When you are global, people like me, for example, whenever I travel, people think that I'm Chinese. I mean Chinese from mainland China, or people think that you are from, Central Asia, Kazakhstan, So really, it doesn't really matter whether you're Malaysian. Most people don't even know where Malaysia is sometimes, You have to say it's actually between Singapore and Thailand. Thailand is actually more popular sometimes. But anyway, so I think it's very important for us to realize that branding really is about the quality of your work, the quality of your product. So a lot of people don't realize that. People think that by having a nice logo, it makes a big difference. It does not. You might have the crappiest logo, and yet you deliver, you have the right products, the best quality, you will still have a good brand.
Lovely. Dr. Faiz, would you like to?
Can I just take the question about entrepreneurs versus corporates? 40% of the Japanese economy is driven by SMEs. And if you ever wander around the back streets of Tokyo, you'll find that sometimes, by the way, I got lost once and I was wandering around. You'll suddenly find, behind these houses, suddenly there's a little shed. And inside that shed, they're making something. And it came home to me when I was reading, I think I was watching a program about how they made this German sports car. But they had this map. And basically there was something like 25 different little companies all around Germany that just made one part for their car, right? So it was the SMEs. And I was very surprised that an SME would have the ability, the know-how and all that to build, for example, the carbon fiber seat they seated. But this outfit was a specialist in just carbon fiber and could build anything you want. And it was an SME. It wasn't a big corporate giant. So the point to me is that actually SMEs are the engine for a country. You can't rely purely on big corporates because big corporates are like big oil tankers. If an oil tanker is going down and you say turn right, it takes 10 miles for them to slow down so that they can turn. The SMEs, on the other hand, are speedboats. Bzz, 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 chun, turn, right? They have the ability to move very fast and react. Big corporates don't. And big corporates get it wrong, right? IBM, Nokia, right? So personally, if I had a view, it would be that I would support more entrepreneurs rather than big corporates. Yes, there's a role for both of them, but if you want resilience in the economy, it has to be with the SMEs and the entrepreneurs. I'll leave the brand to you, Dato'.
Just a quick one on the, thank you, Dato', and also one for saying that, you still need the big corporates. But I share with them, you need, it's like pyramid there. You need the top, the big boys. You need also the SMEs. But SMEs, the percentage has to be higher. That is where the sustainability of the economy of any particular the economy or country can be sustained. I think sustainability is a very, very important word that has been stressed today. Okay, and for all of you, I think some of you might have known this, that for the big the corporate bodies, the GLC, it is also our I would say sustainable. It's not just responsibility, but sustainable objective to make sure that we work together with SMEs. Each one of us has got programs that support the vendor development and so on and so forth. And a lot of resources and effort. It is a KPI also for big corporation to have this. It's not because of we have to because somebody asked us, no. because it's also for the sustainability of the business. The other one is on, I want to share one thing about this entrepreneurship at what age. I have two, I think around this table who can say that I got entrepreneurs in my family that has been developed by the mentor. And the mentor is me, by advisor only. I got my first two boys, one an accountant, the other one's an engineer. And when they graduated, what do? So I told them when they seek advice and opinion, number one, make sure you start paying me back my money. But again, as one said, exactly what I did. You all go into first 5 years of your life, go around and learn about the business that you like, learn about finance, build up your network, and disturb some people, make some people unhappy, make some people happy, let's test them, and test whether who are loyal friends of yours, and so on and so forth. And then there come a time, and both of them actually left. One was with, not with PwC, but EY for a short while. So, and then another one was with Boston and so on, and then they decided to leave, and they told me, I want to be an entrepreneur. Coming from people like me who has never been entrepreneur really per se, except that I nearly became entrepreneur at also 30 plus. I left the GLC, but I was forced in inverted commas to come back after starting entrepreneurship for 1 year. I got a franchise also for NW at that time. Anyway, that was history. I was fated to be entrepreneur in this way. But the two boys of mine, yes, one is now a shareholder as well as an executive director. His finance background helps his team, his group, to go into business, which is like holding company, investment, securities, and investment in properties, etc. So they call it, I don't know, they call it general entrepreneurship, is it? Not IT per se, but focus more on the service solution provider. The other boy actually is also 30 plus. But the basic thing that is more into a niche where it involves space. Creating space for the younger generation, the students, and so on and so forth. Anyway, I told them 2 years. If you cannot make it, you don't see the sense of direction, and you start wavering, you do another 2 more years. If not, you better go back to where it has more footing, because you have to think of your family and rest. So this is just an example of the reality of how people did. Whether that is the best way, I do not know. So today, after so many years, they are okay. So that is in support of the technique, as one said just now. Lastly, I talk about branding. Yes, the Malaysian brand or global brand. I think the key thing is not so much of whether it's Malaysia, whether it is Singapore or whatever. It is a brand where the people of the world like to use your products and services. That's the key. All right, and then location-wise, it can be anywhere. If the business direction that you are going forward says that you have to be located in different places for sustainability of your business, you have to do so, you have to do so. There is no emotions, in this case, or sentiment that is required. But at the same time, the fact that you are coming from a base of Malaysians, there is a difference between the base is Malaysian, as again the base is Malaysia. Meaning, a Malaysian means individuals. Malaysian as a person who can even start their business in Taiwan. And so remember there's a one Taiwan IP. So therefore, is a Malaysian, is a brand, global brand created by Malaysian. That another is where it is created out of Malaysia. That's the difference. Like if you are like Sam Darby, in a way we are not, today we are not really 100% Malaysian. 60, 70% of our revenue and profits generated globally. Okay, Malaysia and Singapore forms about 30, 40% of our profits. But then our key products and the key expertise and the brand that comes out of it is Malaysia-based. Therefore, it is associated as Malaysian multinational today. So that is, the bottom line is the sustainability of the brand determines more, it's more important than where is the brand is to be placed, whether Malaysia or globally. Don't be emotional. Thank you.
Right, due to absence of time, we'll be closing soon, but as we close, we have a 1 minute closing from each of the speakers.
I think the takeaway for you guys, if we can summarize, I think first of all, I think we agree that if you want to be an entrepreneur, you would probably best start learning first in a corporate. And when I say corporate, it doesn't mean that it has to be like a corporate company. You can also work with large multinationals or large services companies such as PwC. Someone pointed out to me in WhatsApp, McKinsey, BCG, and these are places where when you are there, you learn best practices and you learn how big companies run big businesses. So this is very important. I think secondly, friendship. The network of friends that you have now, don't lose them, keep in touch. Nowadays you have WhatsApp, you have Facebook. You really have no excuse not to know what's going on, And I think thirdly, at the point when you really want to break away and start your own business, from my personal personal view, you must have enough money on your own to save for the rainy days, because you are bound to fail. And when you do, you must have enough for your family, for you to survive along the way. And things nowadays are not as easy as it is before. I think life becomes more complicated, and there are more things, rising cost of living and all that kind of stuff. So these are all real. So, but again, all the best to all of you. I hope, all of you will become great entrepreneurs in your own small world one day, inshallah.
1 minute closing, sir.
I guess my main kind of giveaway would be this. Firstly, I don't think entrepreneurship is a silo thing, meaning that, as Dato' Sri mentioned, even within a corporate, you can still be entrepreneurial, and therefore there are different shades of it. It's more of a mindset thing. But what I would also say as a second point is that not everyone can do it, right? Because not everyone can take that kind of level of risk. There's just some people who just are not built that way, right? So don't feel that you're a failure because you're not a risk taker, right? Or an entrepreneur. And that's the second point. Not everyone can do this. But if you think you have those attributes, then you go to the third point, which is learn the industry, learn the skills, understand the different components of what it would take to have a successful business, and go for it. If there's one thing, I'm just thinking back, I had one of my better managers come to me one day and said, "Boss, I could stay and be a partner, or I can go off and set up my own business, creating, well, basically it's the software and the phone when you play games." So I looked at him and I said, "Look, similar to Dato' Sri, I said, go away, try it for 2 years. When you run out of money, come back." Right? Because I told him, look, if you do not try this, you will never know whether it would have worked. And you will always feel that regret. Maybe I should have tried. So I said, you're young enough. At that stage, he wasn't married. I said, if you feel that this is really your passion, and don't forget, he was an accountant and one of the better ones. I said, you've got the basic skill sets. Go off and sort it out. He never came back. In fact, every time you use your phone and do something, he gets like 1 cent or something stupid like that. But, point is, he went and he's never regretted it. So please remember, not everyone can be an entrepreneur, right? There are certain things you need to put in place before you go venturing out. But ultimately, if you have the passion for it, go for it.
Okay, just I think my one last takeaway from me will be, I think assuming that you have got all that stuff to be entrepreneur, but there's always remember there is in this world, people have described this. It's not my word. Either you be a good entrepreneur, a bad entrepreneur, or an ugly entrepreneur. So please be a good entrepreneur. Meaning you must practice what we have said all that just now, okay? And also sustainability business, responsible practices, okay? Responsible practices and also responsible products and so on and so forth. I think you know what it means. Because your performance, what you do, we talk about Malaysian base, Blair brand and global brand, you have a bearing on what's going to happen to the other Malaysians of your generation and future generation when they go into entrepreneurship within, not just within the country, but more importantly as we go, we talked about it just now, globalization. Because if you don't do that, you find that if you belong to the two categories, you are making it more and more difficult for Malaysian entrepreneurs who are good and excellent to even able to start. Okay? So that's my last take. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And can we give a round of applause to this panel speakers? I do believe that.
Thank you. To conclude our second session, I would like to invite Farid Al-Azim, Head of UKEC Careers, to present tokens of appreciations to our guest speakers. Thank you. We would also like to remind everyone that we have our social media contest and you can win awesome gadgets. It's still up. If you can see the flyers that are placed on your chairs previously, we have Twitter and Instagram contests.
Yep. And just a quick note. UKEC Cares, UKEC Charisma, which is our volunteering division, are recruiting. So if you're interested in any form of social work or in volunteering, please head over to the booth outside. If you're interested, go ahead and sign up. We're also recruiting for UKEC Entrepreneurship, which is one of our new divisions. The booth, please go to the booth and check it out. Oh yes, and careers fairs as well. There's information provided about careers fairs at the booth as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a